In my years of experience in theater and observing other actors through rehearsals and performances, one aspect of this field that I have found truly compelling was a young actor's ability to realistically portray emotions on stage from experiences they have never had themselves. Although there are many drama theorists who have postulated techniques on how to navigate these emotions, these approaches vary greatly in terms of their technique. For instance, Lee Strasberg's method acting involves using a technique called emotional memory, wherein it requires actors to use their own emotions and life experiences to inspire their character's behavior, whereas Stanislavski's system allows an actor to analyze the character's given circumstances and then construct their behavior based on their knowledge of the character. Despite these variations, very little research has been conducted to understand the process of how an actor develops a character's emotions from the beginning on a psychological level. With this research, I'm intending to explore the techniques that actors use to create character emotions and comparing these results to their training to try and determine if practicing actors use a systematic approach to character development. My research had two aims. The first was to investigate the ways in which actors create realistic emotions based on different methods of acting, and the second was to determine if the emotions they portrayed were artificially stimulated or provoked through emotional memory. To answer these questions, I invited undergraduate theater majors from 10 universities to complete an online questionnaire. Participants were excluded if they had not yet performed in a theatrical performance at their university. The survey included questions about basic demographic information, as well as their training, whether or not they've used emotional memory, and information about their preferred techniques when developing a character. In total, 17 participants, 10 men and 7 women, completed the questionnaire and were included in the subsequent analysis. The dataset included 50% that were trained in Stanislavski's system, 23.5% were trained in Stanislavski and Chekhov, 17.6% were trained in Stanislavski, Chekhov, and Meisner, and 29.4% of the participants had no training. I found that 88.2% of the participants have used emotional memory in performances before, and of those participants, 86.7 found the technique to be effective. Only one participant seemed to acknowledge the consequences of its practice, which included the psychological damage arising from an actor's inability to compartmentalize their own emotions from their character. A dilemma such as this can be found in some Broadway actors, such as Ben Platt in his performance of Evan Hansen in the musical Dear Evan Hansen. In an interview, Platt expressed that he would only use emotional memory when he did not feel connected to the scene or his scene partner. He stated that emotional memory was difficult for him to use and it was hard to recover from its practice. Because of these possible psychological consequences of emotional memory, it surprised me to see that many actors used emotional memory as a technique, especially considering none of them were trained in Strasberg's method. However, most participants said that they used this method only occasionally, which allowed me to assume that the actors only used this method when it was necessary and not in regular practice. No significant interaction was found between the participants' training and their use of emotional memory. The next question I wanted to answer was if and when actors are not using emotional memory, what techniques do they prefer to use when creating a character's emotions? I discovered that 36% of participants used breathing exercises and meditation to help connect with their character and inspire their emotions. Breathwork and meditation techniques are often used by independent actors and professors, especially in the US and Western Europe, and is often recognized as a technique of method acting. Another detail I found particularly interesting from this discovery was that the majority of the actors preferred to use an external method of character development, which would include things like breathwork, meditation, physicality, and movement, rather than an internal approach, which would include relying on things like emotional memory and analyzing and reflecting on their characters' thoughts and motivations. Many of the actors stated that using these external techniques allowed them to perform with more consistent control and help them respond naturally to their surroundings. This is consistent with a thesis written by Byron Lee Cooley Jr. at the University of Louisville, wherein he documents his rehearsal process using both an external and internal approach. He states that the external acting approach kept him focused on his body and his scene partners, which allowed him to feel less pressure as an actor trying to show the audience what he was able to do. When the participants were asked what they thought was the most difficult emotion to portray, the majority of them said sadness. Additionally, what I found interesting was that after analyzing the different gender identifications, I found that the majority of the female respondents believed that joy and happiness were the most difficult emotions to portray, while the majority of the male respondents believed that sadness was the most difficult to portray. Finally, when the participants were asked whether they experienced the same emotions as their character during an emotional scene on a scale from never to always, the majority of the respondents said that they frequently experienced the same emotions. I also found that 71.4% of female participants experienced the same emotions as their character regularly, while 60% of male participants experienced the same emotions as their character at the same rate. In conclusion, despite the small group of participants, this research can serve as a model for additional research, which may consider asking the participants how they felt after a highly emotional scene, or conducting interviews on practicing actors immediately following a performance to determine if their opinions about how they create emotions are related to how they perform them. Further exploration into this topic also might consider a focus on observational data rather than self reported data in order to differentiate how actors describe their emotions versus how they are actually seen portraying them. Likewise, the role of gender in emotionally demanding performances, as well as the effectiveness of an actor's training, could be further explored. Preliminary examination on this topic is important because if we can analyze the way actors navigate their character emotions in respect to compartmentalizing their own, we can demystify the complex nature of portraying emotions. By researching this topic more closely, we can create a more organized way for undergraduate students to learn how to develop a character's emotions, which would allow them to determine what techniques work best for them. Thank you.